Hello, my name is Peter Cinnamon and you're very welcome to a podcast which is all about the Irish League, where everything is looking sky blue right now, or black and pink depending on the fixture. Top of the league, 7 wins on the bounce. This run from Ballymena just keeps on going and going. Are they properly now top 6 contenders this season, or could it be even more? Only 1 point behind, Dungannon will want to be included in that conversation after they convincingly took care of business against a leggy Larne at Inver Park. Elsewhere, Glens battle back to turn Linfield fans' smiles upside down. Mid-Ulster is blue once again, and we look back at Stuart King's tenure at Carrick Rangers as the Amber Army look for a brand new boss. Plenty to sink your teeth into on your latest weekly edition of Kicking Match. Loads of games and news stories all battling out for top billing on the pod this week. The one headliner, though, who'll be here from the opening bell to the main event, is my guest. He is sports podcaster, commentator. Please don't make this man choose between his dearly beloveds of cricket and Carrick. It's great to welcome back to the podcast. Hello, Ali McCalmont. How are you?
Hi, Peter. Yeah, a little bit better this day after the last few weeks have been pretty difficult for Carrick Rangers fans. But after yesterday's result, obviously it's lifted a wee bit of the blues, if you want to put it that way. But I'm doing pretty good.
Some result that, all being said, lots of big reactions on the pitch in more ways than one. And it's just one of many unique little results that we've seen over the weekend, and it's just one of those weekends where everything felt as though there was a little change in mood there, a little twist in the tail there, and interesting weekend. But no matter where you go, Ali, it's always going to be headlined by what is the biggest, the highest attended battle between two teams this league has to offer. And look, we're rightly into October now. It is spooky season, and it's fair to say if there's one nightmare that Linfield fans have, it's throwing it away at home against Glentoran. And all of those horrific images came to life on Friday night. Glentoran winning, big surprise against the Blues. First time since that royal beating 2 years ago at Windsor Park, where we thought, here the Glens go. That was the rubber stamping of what we thought was a mega team. What it ended up being was pretty much the final big hurrah before it all faded away. Different kind of time right now, but Glentoran fans are ecstatic. The depths of ill feeling of the Blues at this moment in time is at peak levels. They simply threw it away, and results broadly went their way elsewhere, so it's not as bad, but they're throwing points away in big moments, and I think this will be remembered for a long time to come this season.
I think you're spot on there. I think this is one of those games for the home side that will be remembered. Obviously, the away team have come away with a massive win, given where they've been at recently. It's been difficult to watch Glentoran, let's be honest, at home particularly. But to put on a performance like that in the second half, probably get the Glentoran in a minute. But for Linfield at home, turned over in the second half, and I do mean turned over. I mean, they were so dominant in the first half that they should have been out of sight, really, and just not clinical. And then even in that first half, I thought they were playing everything through Joel Cooper. Everything was going through him. He was a live wire. Got the first goal, obviously. Lovely little move in the second half of that first half, and they just got down the line, and if that second chance had gone in, we might have been talking about a completely different scenario here. But went in at 1-0, and then the second half was just a completely different game. David Healy obviously talked about afterwards that he was so disappointed in that the way they came out in the second half and literally down tools. As soon as that first goal went in from Donnelly, the body language just went. And this is a derby, and I know everything gets doubled in derbies. Everything that's why it's so important, because the jeopardy is there for both teams, and it just gets ramped up. And as you say, I think this will be one that the Linfield fans will remember for the rest of the season. It kind of reminds me of when Liverpool came to Man United and won 5. You've got to do something massive then and win a trophy, or do something to really renege their memories of this defeat. And Linfield are going to have to go on a run now, and they've got a big game coming up now in the County Antrim Shield, which wouldn't have been. I mean, Healy's talking about playing a second team. I think he might revise that now, and because it's a big game now. If they get knocked out of the County Antrim Shield, I know it's their lowest trophy that they're going for, but just the optics of it now, losing a derby, two big games now against Crusaders, I think. And yeah, the social media went into meltdown over the past few days.
That game was all aspects of Linfield's seasons wrapped up into one sweet package with a bow on it. I've yet to see a complete 90-minute performance from Linfield. I've seen some great moments. I've seen some excellent halves, ones where they're in charge and then they let it slip. I've seen times where they're pretty middling in most of the first half, and then later on, second half, they go through the gears. I've even seen them thump teams and then just glide their way through the second half and not really being under threat. They're getting results. They're getting goals. They're letting in goals as well. And for a full-time team, that has to be the most frustrating thing if you are a fan of Linfield, because you can see the points where they're being dropped. And as a full-time side, this shouldn't be an issue. Consistency playing from minute 1 to minute 90 should be your strength over other teams, where you can take your eye off the ball for 20 minutes, but you can still come back and outwork and outrun teams. And that's not something Linfield have done so far this season for extended periods of time. They have the skill, they have the quality. Joel Cooper looks like the best player in the league when he gets his chances. I don't think he's a man that can really, and that's probably the reason for this, he is not going to be able to maintain his high levels of performance and energy across 90 minutes. That's why he's getting subbed off. He's trying to lean into him, I think, David Healy, to try and lean into the strength, and that should work, but it's unraveling, and they can be caught out at the back. And you also got to give a bit of credit on this night in particular to Dungannon and Glentoran. They got their yard, they got their bit of space. Jay Donnelly is able to execute with precision, and they just kept the pressure up. The Blues looked to be wobbled. You hate conceding from a set piece the way they did. Big Frankie Vid, what a guy. And like the Calmy Palmer goal is going to be highlight reel, nightmare fuel stuff, isn't it? That is the goal. I think everyone will feel as though that goal summed up the entire night. That's not exactly true, but when you're 2-1 down, you've not hassled your attackers in the way you should. You let a bit of concentration slip from a set piece. Glentoran just looked more hungry for it. They're still charging down at that part of the game. 3-1 looks like a heroic victory for Glentoran.
I think the bigger problem is that the fans are looking at no tactics really at the minute. How are they actually, what's the plan of attack for Linfield? They're not controlling games anymore like they used to, maybe the midfield. But looking at the Glens, just that turnaround, and you've got to give Glenavon a massive shout out, because they were so outplayed in the first half that it looked a bit of a problem for them. And it could be, as I say, they probably should have gone in 2-0 down, but when they didn't, the turnaround, little tweak tactically, but Linfield didn't react. And Glentoran, once they got that first goal, they got a little bit more space. Jay Donnelly does what he can do. He picked one out of nowhere and got that first goal. But from the minute that first goal went in, Glentoran took over. They absolutely took over, and it was almost a matter of time before they got the second. Yes, it comes from a set piece, as you say, and listen, I watched Glentoran at Carrick Rangers that day, and Frankie Fidd was just a young kid looking like he was in the park, and he was loving it and running about everywhere. His energy was really infectious, and I think he is going to be a bit of a cult hero if he's not already at the Oval. And obviously getting a goal on his first game against Linfield will not do him any harm with the fans, and just the way it's one of those ones where a 6-yard buck buries it and sticks his head on it where everybody else was fearing to go. And brilliant from him. And then, as you say, Cammy Palmer, ex-Blue man, just nipping it off Shieldsman and just tucking it away. And I think he said in his post-match that he couldn't help but celebrate. He was right in front of the Glens fans and just couldn't really help himself. And he was thinking about it, I should have, and he just went with the moment. But that's actually a thing I was thinking about. You mentioned earlier about the game a couple of years back when they went to the Windsor and won 3-0 comfortably. after that game, if you remember, Mick McDermott was very on the pitch, and it was all going on. And it was very, very similar there on Friday night. The players were all really celebrating. Look, you just beaten your biggest rivals 3-1 when you haven't been going through a really good patch. But it was really noticeable that Declan Devine, after the game, played all that down. He went back to the old, it's 3 points, we don't win next week. And then Cammy Palmer and his said the same thing. So although there was a lot of euphoria on the pitch, I noticed after the game they definitely tried to play it down in terms of, let's not do what we did the last time. Whereas you say, it became a bit of a nadir moment for them. It sort of went pear-shaped from there, and they definitely don't want that to happen now. They've got it's going to be a big game next week now against Dungannon. It's going to be a top four clash now. So they'll want to kick on now, as opposed to this being their big moment of the season.
I don't know what we learned from Glentoran after this game. Was this just the wind was up them and they play great and they'll return to the mean after this? Or is this the kickstart of what Glentoran hope they can be? If you look at their place in the table, it's quite surprising because they've been a drifting through the furrow, a non-entity at times, and they're still sticking around even at this early stage in a good area of the table. It's not like they've fallen away trying to climb back, so that they're in the mix of where they want to be, and you have to use momentum. I know the answer here, and there's a feeling of typical Glentoran is to go on and then do nothing for the next few weeks, but you have to take something from this, and spirit has been something they have been lacking in. Looks as though they've maybe got it if they can kind of capture this and use this to incentivize the next few weeks.
Yeah, and I think that's where the manager really kicks in now. That's where he earns his corn, I think, is to let them have their celebrations after the game. As I say, you're going to celebrate at Windsor. You've just had a fantastic win. But it was, as I say, really striking that he tried to lay it down and say, this is the standard that we've got to get to. But it is key now, that game against, they've got Carrick in the County Antrim Shield on Tuesday. And again, that's another chance of a trophy at the end of the day. And it's first season. If you can get a trophy in your first season, so if the Glens can get into a semi-final there in the County Antrim Shield, obviously that gives them another opportunity there. And then a big game, as I say, next weekend against Dungannon, which we might touch on later. But momentum now is key. If they can build a few, not just for the Glens, for every team in the league now, it's really concertinaed up at the top. And any team that can go on a run of 4, 5, 6 wins, as we've seen from the team at the top, you can really start to get going and get that momentum and get into a habit of winning. And that's where the Glens have been lacking for the past couple of years now. They get these big wins, one-off wins, but really can't go on a run. And so far this season, as I say, I watched them a couple of times and haven't really inspired me too much. And that second half performance against the Blues, just for me, came from absolutely nowhere. I don't know what, just a moment of magic from Donnelly. It got that goal, and maybe that was just the spark. And as you say, then, is that going to take them upwards on the roller coaster, or have they reached the top and are going to just fall off the top again?
Well, let's move to your Carrick Rangers. And since the last time I've been behind this mic, Stuart King has ended his tenure as boss of Carrick. It was something that many felt as though it was inevitable, it was going to happen unless these results were going to turn around. And week by week, the losses piled up. The performances didn't seem to be up to snuff. The area in the table was looking concerning. There's a lot more pressure on him, or there was in that job at Carrick. There's a lot more expectation than there was. He fought on valiantly, but in the end, when the chips are down, nothing was going for him. And a defeat to Queens in the cup last week was that was it. Stepping away, and I guess it's a good time now just to reflect on Stuart King's time in charge of the club. He took them from where they were in the league, trying to fight off relegation, to their highest placed position in the league. He has absolutely been a benefactor of this investment that has come in, and ultimately, you've got to say, football's a results business. It's easier to change management than it would be to completely change up the squad. His first game away from the club, it's a big result, huge turnaround in performance, and Carrick Rangers win 2-0 against Cliftonville. But Ali, Stuart King's gone from Carrick, and I think when it comes to what he did at the club, pretty positive overall.
I would totally echo that. Positivity all the way. Obviously, it's been a difficult week for any club that has to change a manager. It's a difficult week when you have to do that. But a lot of stories coming out about there was friction and all that. From my personal point of view, having been about the club for quite some time, I don't see that at all. I think it's been very amicable. If ever these things can be amicable, I think after the game on Tuesday, I was at the game on Tuesday. We were poor. Let me get that out there. Carrick were poor. Queens were excellent. Don't get me wrong; they were excellent. But Carrick at that level should be good enough to beat Queens University. But Queens were excellent. Got their goal. What a goal from the halfway line, by the way! I give Chris Middleton a shout. He scored from the halfway line. He done it, Danny Gibson. But you know, after the game, you could see Stuart was just deflated, and it'd been taking its toll on him. There's no doubt about it. It's been taking its toll on him. But that to me it's sometimes you look at it and positive is a weakness. That's his positive. He's an all-in guy. As I've sort of thought, before this, he's 100-mile-an-hour manager. He goes at 100 miles an hour. And just if you're like that as a person, and you drive a car at 100 mile an hour, sometimes the engine will just blow up. You've got to sometimes, and he's not a guy like that. He just wants to go all in. And look, at Carrick Rangers, he almost was the perfect fit for me at Carrick Rangers. To be fair to the board, they had a lot of good candidates back in 2021 when Niall Curry left. Did some good candidates, high-profile candidates. They took a chance on a PIL manager. And at that interview, I spoke to a few people afterwards. In the interview, he just come across really hungry. He wanted to perform. He wanted to get his chance. And be fair, I think he was just like a kid in a sweet shop. He'd been given a chance to manage at the top level, and he wanted to do well for Carrick Rangers first and foremost, not for himself. He would be quite open that it was possibly a stepping stone, maybe to get a bigger, high-profile job eventually. But that he always wanted to do well for Carrick, and that would then create the persona for him to maybe get an extra job, maybe at a higher pro. Maybe Linfield was obviously his eventual destination, was where his nirvana, if you wanted. But he wanted to do well for Carrick Rangers and saw that as his post match. I always watched his post match. He was entertaining in his post match. He was honest all the way along the line. And you mentioned about record points tallies. He did it twice. He did 2 in a row. And yes, Carrick Rangers fans will look back, 76, Irish Cup winning. But in terms of league campaigns, you would have to suggest he's been Carrick Rangers' greatest ever manager. You'd have to say that because he's beaten, I think, I could be, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think he's beaten every single team in the league, bar Larne. At some stage, he's beaten everybody. Larne's the only team, obviously, he's standing rivals, and he'll be frustrated about that. I know that he will not be happy about that he didn't do well against Larne. But he's beaten everybody. He's beaten Linfield at home. He's beaten Glentoran away. All sorts of things, and records he's done. And for me, he was the perfect fit for Carrick. And he was hungry and wanted to do well. They're a small club. They shouldn't be, but that's another article we could get into. They shouldn't be a small club in the population of the town rather. But he was just a perfect fit for me. And sometimes results just come along, and I think he just run out of gas at the end, to go with the 100-mile-an-hour car analogy. He just run out of gas. And I would definitely say it. You never want to say it's amicable. You never want to lose his job. But for what he's done at Carrick, and if a new person comes in and takes it to another level, then I think it'll be looked back at that Stuart King laid the foundations to take that club to that level. I think it was perfect fit when he came in, and just a nice guy as well. I know a lot of people will, away fans and whatnot, will say that he was difficult on the sidelines. And look, at sometimes we would have been sort of hiding behind it when he was going off at the referee or something, but that was his passion. But like, one thing I really want to get across here in terms of Stuart, my memory of him, and this will sound a little bit silly in terms of what my memory of his time at Carrick would be, irrespective of the result. If you know Carrick, there's a little gate just at the changing rooms where the players go into the changing rooms. Irrespective of the result, Stuart would walk down to that gate and stay there at the end of a game and shake the hand of all his own players, but also every opposition player that walked off and the officials. And he even did it on Tuesday night against Queens when he knew that was his last game. The officials came off. Neil Shields, who's that Carrick goalkeeper, they had an embrace at the end of the game. And just that, he was abrasive. Don't get me wrong. He would go at it 90 minutes, but his quality just at the end, where he would go over to the opposition and shake their hands no matter. And he's had some tough defeats. Don't get me wrong. He's had some difficult last minute defeats, but to me, just that just love of football will always come across with Stuart, and he loves football. And just as I said earlier, it was just like a kid at a way getting a go at management. That sounds a little bit patronising, but at the start, that's what he was like for me. But he learnt all the way along, and he was a lot more tactically astute than a lot of people give him credit for. So for me, he's laid the foundations for the club to go further now after the real.
You're making me reflect on just the change in perception that he brought Carrick to other fans across the league. They were the seventh place team, not automatically, but they would be seen as the team who would be in pole position for it. They were the team that you would always go, this Carrick could maybe, if they're going to give any top six side a tough going. Consistency clearly an issue last year, but he was able to bring together a team who could thrill, who could get the results, and that's what people I think maybe forget, that yes, he wasn't getting results for what Carrick Rangers are expected to be now, but this would have been run of the mill come 3 years ago, and Carrick are only really now over the past 4 years or so establishing themselves as that nailed on team. Ultimately, I am talking to managers the odd time in some of my roles in this league, and I feel, particularly this podcast, my job is to feel really standoffish, but I just, one of my early interactions with them doing interviews, I think I was, final game, Linfield had won the league, and sometimes when you think you know something, it's always better to check. And I think I was about to go on air, and Linfield are parading around, and I kind of turned up as a Shamrock Park, and I go, Stuart, just remind me again, you won the league with Linfield, did you? Which is such a stupid question to ask realistically, but I just really didn't. I didn't have time to search on my phone to make 100% sure. And like, fair play to him, I just remember him looking up at me and going, yeah, I did. How old are you, son? Kind of look. So I don't know, that always kind of made me feel like, you know what, fair play to you, but look, the results were rotten, and I wonder, from someone who would see Carrick week in and week out, what really, I know it's hard sometimes to latch on to what happens in a loss. You can always point to a variety of one-off moments, but what really has gone wrong this season so far for Carrick Rangers?
This season, I think it is that old cliche of small. It is literally small margins. I think they've just been a yard off it. They brought a few new players in, and obviously that creates its own little thing when you bring a new player in. But the idea of bringing those new players in was to take them to another level. But I just think it's a small margin. It's just being a yard off the pace here and there. I do think defensively they've been weak in terms of controlling their 6-yard box. I've mentioned to you before last time I was on, I've still got an issue with Ross in goal in terms of his clearing his line. He's a fantastic goalkeeper, don't get me wrong, shot stopping, I think he's one of the best in the league, but it just creates a little bit of nervousness in that sort of centre half area. Couple of injuries, Stuart mentioned it a few times about injuries as senior players just weren't available as often as possible, but I think it literally was just a lack of confidence. And once you get on that run, I mean, first day of the season, I think, pre-season, beating Glenavon first day up, I think second week of your podcast, it would have been completely different. Carrick Rangers are going to finish in the top 6. Glenavon are going to be struggling at the bottom, but how quickly it can change. And Glenavon got on a little bit of a run after that, picked up a few points. Carrick just went the other way. And when we look at Loughgall, turned Carrick over really easily in that game 3-0. And I think that was just, it really just dropped the confidence that day, and they never got it back. They just never got the confidence back. They didn't play that well yesterday, but they did a job. They sat in and nullified Cliftonville completely and got their breaks, and were clinical when they got a couple of chances that they needed. So that, I think, is where they've gone back yesterday, is just to be more solid defensively. And I think that was the biggest problem. They were just conceding too many goals.
Did he not get it right in the summer transfer window? Was that part of his downfall, or is that unfair?
I think that's unfair in that I think these are good quality players that they brought in. He's Heatley. He's going to do a job. Yesterday, the Liverpool fans were giving him a lot of tap yesterday, as you would expect. He's astute. He knows the game inside out, and will win you free kicks and so on, and knows how to manage a game. And he did that yesterday when he got the ball on the wing. He wasn't just giving it away, and then Cliftonville would come again. He held on to it, created a few things, bought free kicks, as I say. In the midfield, Lucas played really well yesterday. Really well yesterday. Luke McCulloch at the back had a stop-start, got injured. But I genuinely think, I know we talked a few days ago about seventh place is maybe gone, but I definitely wouldn't rule that out for Carrick now, depending on what comes in here.
The way that league's been going
Yeah.
over the past fortnight, rip up your books, because honestly anything can change.
Definitely.
So you don't feel as though the push for experienced players who some might view as perhaps being on the wrong end of their career to not be a top six player going into Carrick. Like, look, the Irish League has infamously been famous for players getting one last paycheck and not delivering on the hype that they were. And the one thing that Carrick have benefited from is that time and time again, you can name them, they've ultimately worked out. Cushley's worked out. Allen's worked out. You have had Mitchell work out. I'm not saying that people were expecting them to be there, but you're signing players who are either 30 or significantly into 30, and they're still popping up, and the motivation is there, and they're working really, really well together. This summer, you add in, is he 37 or 36? You then add in a defender in McCullough, who injury issues, again, either 30 or touching it. People will go, has the tread and the tires finally gone out? Clearly Saturday rubbishes that idea, and sometimes personality, momentum, ideas, it needs to be freshened up. But the changes has happened because of where they are in the league. Have expectations changed? We don't know who the manager is, and we'll talk about who might be in the frame in a second. But if we're sitting here right now and I'm the board and I'm talking to the next manager, what's being said to them is, look, hopefully you can come in and get us back to seventh? Or is it, look, we just need to survive this season because X amount of losses in a row has put us behind the 8 ball?
Definitely not the latter. It is definitely upward. I can assure you of that. The investment has come in, as you mentioned, over the past sort of 18 months, and the level of expectation has increased in the fans, obviously, because they've obviously seen. And Stuart King's downfall is, as you mentioned, sort of a little bit on the top of that he's taken them to 8th, he's taken them to 7th. Can we kick on to 6th? In pre-season, that would have been, everybody was talking about that. And sometimes when everybody talks about it, it doesn't happen, which is where we're at here now. But definitely this appointment that's coming is a big one in the future of the club. I definitely can see a more high profile appointment here in order to try and take them to the level. We in Carrick, 14 miles down the road, our East Antrim rivals are the blueprint. I know that sounds a little bit ridiculous where they are at the minute and where we are, but a couple of years ago we were both in the championship. Lauren ran away with the championship when the money from Kenny first came in. They ran away with it, but Carrick finished second that year and got up in the playoff. We both came up at the same time. Now Lauren have gone exponential, and we'll probably get on to them a little bit later, but that's where Carrick want to be. I know that. That's where they want to go. There's a fan base in the town. I've mentioned about Carrick as a town. It's a big town, but we can't get the supporters to watch the games. We just can't. We can't. They have a really loyal fan base who will come week in, week out. They'll go home and away, but it's small, and they really need to buy into that. I mean, why and how it's just not. We don't get bums on seats, unfortunately, and sometimes you got to win games to do that, and they were starting to sort of get going in a wee bit of silverware. And probably Stuart King will probably look back over his few years, and probably that'll be his biggest disappointment. Carrick didn't get a real run in the cups where we could run a job. We're not going to win a league. It's just not going to happen where we're at right now. And he didn't really get a run in the cups. We got knocked out in penalties in the Irish Cup twice in a row, and got to a semi-final in the County Antrim Shield, and then lost to Dundela a couple of years ago in a quarter-final. We had a real run at it. And things like that. Just get knocked out of cup competitions when really that's the one thing that he could have done to get a bit of silverware would have really taken him the next level. And that's probably his one disappointment with the cup competitions. But him and Scotty Irvine, as I say, I mentioned Scotty Irvine as well. On that point, Scotty's been at Carrick a long time. He managed the under-20s for a long time and then came in as assistant for played there as well. And he's been fantastic to try and sort of calm Stuart down at times and keep him on a level playing field. And the two of them work really well. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if and when Stuart gets another job that Scotty will go with him. They work really well together. So I mentioned it, Scotty Irvine as well, for all the work he's done at Carrick. It was his club, and he came along with Stuart. So just to mention him as well. But in terms of what you're saying, I think it's a big appointment. And I mentioned earlier, if it does go well, I think that Stuart will have a lot to do with that.
It's clear now the profile of Carrick is bigger. I've said that. I think the names that will be attracted to this role with the idea of future investment will mean that there's bigger names than ever before are potentially in the frame. For Carrick, it's a club with that eye on the prize. And for Stuart, an element of how he was viewed is probably that he hasn't been able to do that at the top end. And I think, not yet, it's due to experience. And I think now the people, I imagine, from Carrick are looking at this, they probably want to see some form of experience at being beyond the bottom six and someone who's been there, done that at the top six. Let's talk about the names who are being bandied about, who could be out there, because if I'm writing down the list, as I said there, I think a hot shot from down below is probably not what they're looking to go for. And usually once you change from one style, you then move to the other. And I think the move will be towards someone with that experience. Who are the names out there with that experience? It's David Jeffrey, who I don't know if he'll ever return to management just because such a big figure in the media and seems to be enjoying his life at the minute. But, could always be tempted. You have Gary Hamilton, who seems to be in a similar kind of mold. Perhaps doesn't have the prestige of some of the names I'll talk about, but I can imagine he would be highly considered if that was something he'd want to do. And then the big ones sitting on the sideline right now are Stephen Baxter and Paddy McLaughlin. If I was a betting man, and I'm not, I would feel very confident to put my chips on one of them. The name that's being highly touted is Stephen Baxter.
I think Stuart's legacy will be that he's left the club in that position. Yes, okay, the investment's there as well, and but that, as you mentioned, 3 years ago when we were looking for a new manager after Al Curry, although there were some good candidates, we weren't at the level that you've just mentioned there. Obviously, the press have had a bit of a go at it and done a little bit of a who. And he even seen an article during the week there about who's next for Carrick. There was an article about who could be the next manager for Carrick. And I'm thinking, like 3 years ago, 4 years ago, nobody would have cared who the next manager of Carrick was going to be. It would have been just the club itself would have worked it out and threw a manager and said, there you go. And then when Stuart was appointed, it was like, what? A lot of people came to me and said, what are you doing here? What's going on? You need a guy in there to sort you out. And as I said, he was a perfect fit for me. Going forward then, obviously yesterday, you mentioned David Jeffrey. David was at the game. I was chatting to him because he was doing the radio with Michael Clark. And he was there, obviously. But Peter Clark, who's actually the chairman, was mentioned afterwards that Paddy McLaughlin was in the stand as well with his old assistant from Cliftonville. So 2 + 2 = 7, etc. And the media ran away with that and he was questioned on it. I can't give you an exclusive, unfortunately, as much as I would really like to. I would say that those two names you've mentioned won't be a million miles away, although there has been interest from across the water. There has been some contact across the water, even though the job hasn't been sort of touted, if you know what I mean. Carrick Rangers haven't been out saying position vacant, if you know what I mean. Yeah. It's just been that the job is there. People know that the job is there and they've contacted the club. And that, as I say, is way different to where we were 3-4 years ago. And that's, again, a little bit of a testament to where Stuart has left us.
Let's go for the tail of the tape if we are to focus on those two. I mean, you've Stephen Baxter, at the time, longest serving manager in world football. There's nothing that he hasn't seen in Irish League football. Can he do it at somewhere that isn't the Cruise? Question marks. If he was to take it on, it would be seen, and this is me saying this. I would probably view that as his Ballymena from David Jeffrey moving from the Blues. How much does Stephen Baxter want to have that challenge, or is he happy to sit back on the legacy that he has? Question marks would be if you're dared to question a manager of such a trophy haul and experiences. The way football is changing, is he on the cusp of being too old school for where the league's going? Don't know. He has to prove that that's going to be the case, and that's where you bring in Paddy McLaughlin. His weaknesses are all the things that are Baxter's strengths. Hasn't got that trophy haul, but does have that reputation as a great coach, tactician. He's been there in full-time setups with Derry, albeit it didn't work out. Was able to get some great football out of Cliftonville. Knows the league. Would he be seen as a more forward-thinking approach? That's up to the people making the decision, but that's what we have there. Quickly noting on the game there, it's another one of those in the topsy-turvy league that we have. Cliftonville don't turn up, and for the first time this season, pretty much outside of the first game of the season, Carrick Rangers do turn up.
Yeah, yesterday, as I sort of alluded to earlier, they didn't play that well yesterday. They were just solid. I think the two guys, Curtis Allen and Mark Surgeon, who had been given the task of lifting the team. It was really strange yesterday seeing them in they were in tracksuits, but you knew they weren't going to play, and Sergi wasn't even in the squad. So he was basically looking after the team. Curtis was on the bench, but it was quite strange watching them doing the pre-game when they weren't involved in the actual pre-game warm-ups and things like that. They were trying to think about, and they've been very vocal after the game that they don't want anything to do with the manager's role going forward. A lot of times when you win a game straight away, when you're in this caretaker, your first question you're asked is, "Oh, do you want the job?" And again, it happened yesterday. Sergi was absolutely in the campaign of, no, we don't want this job, neither myself or Curtis. It's just a point, but in terms of the game, I do think we talk about the full-time football quite a lot. I think the manager role now is a full-time role now. I know most managers are, but Stuart, for example, has a job. He is a full-time job as well, and I think that's what was taking a lot of toll on him. And I think as we're talking about full-time football, manager roles now are going to be full-time, and it's full on now. It really is. It's a business now, and I think managers are going to have to be a full-time role. I know Niall Curry famously a postman and things like that. These things are moving along. The league is moving along, and I think the management structure's got to move along as well. In terms of the game, I think the guys, Mark Surgeon and Curtis Allen, got it spot on. They were compact, gave Cliftonville the ball. Basically, I think possession would have been 2-1 in the first half. But they were happy to leave them with the ball and hit them on the break with the pace of Danny Gibson, who looked a yard sharper than he had done. I think his goals, obviously, last year propelled Rangers up the league, but he's been struggling this year. Maybe just a yard off. He was back at it yesterday, harrying and hassling. The first goal got a little bit of luck, but it was his tenaciousness that got him in behind, and got a wee bit of luck, don't get me wrong, but that got them in front, gave them something to hang on to. And then the second goal, Clucas's first goal for Carrick, took it really well outside the foot, put it in the far corner. And that was 2-0. And if I'm being honest with you, Peter, Cliftonville didn't lay a glove on them. Did not lay a glove on them. I'm really haven't seen a lot of Cliftonville, but they've obviously been going through a little bit of a lean period. Jim McGilton was a frustrated figure on the bench, a really frustrated figure. And there was only one little chance where Joe Gornick got him behind, lifted over Ross Glentoran, where it went wide, but Ross Glentoran did not have a save to make in 90 minutes.
3 losses in a row. You know how that feels.
Double it.
Yeah. So, that's not where they want to be. I imagine most Reds fans, anyone really connected to the club, are very frustrated. There's always that element of new manager bounce or caretaker bounce, whatever. My goodness, are they the victims of that? Again, they need to get back to what they are and stat in the league. That's them 4 games without a win, and that's why they're in this malaise of teams in the middle of the league as we approach what I would say is, once around the sun, everyone playing each other once. Lauren obviously making that awkward for everybody, but 2 teams who are in the complete opposite sphere right now. Number 1, number 3, Ballymena are now officially top of the league. They thump the league's bottom side in Loughgall, who are, if Ballymena are all green, Loughgall all red. And let's talk about this other massive result. I mean, they are now, for the next years, anytime Larne and Dungannon will meet, it will be a bogey team, because they've gone and done it again. And we thought perhaps Larne coming back away, Europe, playing a game on Sunday, will there be tired legs? Will they be caught out? Yes, they were. But let's not take away this credit from Dungannon either. 3-0 victory, some tidy little goals in there. One of them being James Knowles, one of the other little starlets of the division so far. Ballymena on 21, Dungannon Swifts on 20, only third via goal difference. I mean, it's been built on home form, but 3-0 against Larne, that will be a result like that game between Linfield and Glentoran we'll be talking about all year.
Yeah, very much so. Just 3-0 away from home. Yes, everybody will talk about Larne, European exploits, etc., but take no credit away from Dungannon Swifts at all. From what I've seen of the game, they were well worthy of a 3-0 scoreline. The goals you'd mentioned, Noel's goal in the first one, but the second goal from McGovern, lovely little take, little shimmy, and then picks out the top corner. Excellent stuff from him, and he's been a real good pickup. He stretches the pitch for Dungannon, I think, with his pace. I think he's been a real good pickup for them, and just gives the midfielders a little bit more space to play in. And obviously, Keelan Dillon's been excellent for them, but it's been at the back. I've been absolutely solid, as you know, fantasy football man myself, and having to run that, I'm doing a clean sheet after clean sheet for Dungannon at the minute, and anybody with Dungannon backline, I think that's 6 out of 7 now in a row. 6 out of 7 now after that clean sheet at Larne. And Adam Glennie pick up another goal at the end. He's been your fantasy football pick this year. If it's not Ben Kennedy, it's Adam Glennie. If you've got those two in your team, you'll be at the top of the table, I think, because he's picked up another goal.
That's a man that's got his own carriage on the kick and match hype train. Adam Glennie. That's what a great week for Dungannon. Rodney Macquarie's going to be there for 3 years more, if that was ever in doubt. Dungannon sticking the flag in for their man. They're very happy with him right now, and it's just great team building. But importantly, you can bring all these players together, but it really does take a boss to make it work. And right now, both those sides are doing it. I think the Dungannon thing, yes, the Ballymena is very impressive, all these wins in a row against big sides, but Dungannon have had to learn from their mistakes, take the biffs on the nose, and then come back. I'm not saying that once Ballymena fall away, they'll fade into the nothingness again, but I think the fact that Dungannon are able to raise themselves up performance-wise, they take that loss against Portadown, come back, they have had those moments of adversity, that game against Ballymena where there was the road collision which took out a number of their players. It's just I thought at the start of the season they were going to be tricky. I didn't think they were going to be this tricky, and now clearly we have a situation where Ballymena and Dungannon are absolute top 6 contenders, especially with Dungannon's home form, and it's just going to be about trying to keep this train on the track. Talk about the other sides there. Loughgall, they're all the hallmarks of a team who's going to finish last. Can't score, shipping in goals for fun. In those results where you're conceding many, they aren't pretty goals that you're conceding, and I just don't know where they're going to get their confidence back up and running. They even lose in the cup, when you're feeling down, when it rains or pours, and I mean, in County Armagh there for Loughgall, everything just seems a bit sad.
Yeah, I think they were 2-0 up on that cup game as well, and then sort of everything went pear-shaped, as you say, and it kind of got overlooked a wee bit with the Carrick result against Queens. I think you're spot on in terms of goals conceded now. It seems to be a regular amount, 3+ every sort of game now. And the one game they have won, of course, was that when they pretty much ran Carrick ragged that day. They won 3-0 that day. Ex-Carrick man Jordan Gibson got a couple of goals again.
But even at that, I was there. 2 of them were back-to-back set pieces almost. So in
the 6-yard box, as I've been talking about.
So
yeah,
you take them out, and it's so weird because I have been such a champion for Loughgall. I always love seeing them. However, it's just that I'm going to say this week in and week out, the heads are down, and you can rotate bit by bit, but
I just think it's exactly. I just think it's exactly that. It's exactly the same as my own club character. We're in a complete rut, and it's the mindset of that first goal. If you lose the first goal like they did on Saturday against Ballymena, and then the heads are we're here we go again, and then 2-0. To be fair, they got the third goal, which maybe would have meant, but then again 3-1 almost immediately, and again you're back in that cycle again, and it's just having a wee bit of luck. Like it can change. It can change if you get a little bit of luck, but just right now when we're looking at it from the outside of the club, it just doesn't look good at the minute. And as you mentioned, the hallmarks are there for second season syndrome, and everybody says it. But they do look in a little bit of bother at the minute now.
To touch on the Larne panic, and I'm not saying it is widespread, but I have been hinting that there's something about this Larne side that hasn't rose to the heights that we saw last year, really, at any stage. And to be fair, 8 games played, they win. If you take the 2 that they have on Linfield, add them on, they'll be second on 20th, on 20 points, hardly out of it. However, now that this game has happened at home against the side of Dungannon Swifts, every time, especially coming from away games, these matches will come up. Do teams smell blood? They don't have that same stilted fear factor that they would have against Larne. We will stick a pin in it and come back to it. But for Larne, despite Linfield not being able to get it together consistently week to week, we're not truly, if we're being honest, expecting Ballymena and Dungannon to keep up such a massive haul of points across the league. Everyone else, you've got Glentoran, Crews, Cliftonville around them. We've seen similar weaknesses. We don't expect them to truly be title contenders at this stage. Larne can't have too many of these, can they? They've got to say, like, they've already lost 2 games. They lost 2 games of all of last season. They're not as free-flowing in the scoring department as they were last year, and they're conceding more. I know they're playing lots of games, tough. They had a cup game and then a European game and then a Sunday game, and it will continue to rotate players playing for their country, but they will need to stop the slide. Sharpish.
I tend to agree with you a little bit, but I would disagree a little bit as well. In that, for me, I know this is an easy thing to say given what they've done over the past few years, but I think they are now head and shoulders above everything in the league in terms of infrastructure, their whole business model, irrespective of what's on the pitch. Not even talking about what's on the pitch, their business model is top notch, and it's really well run. Linfield have been that way for years, and I think just Larne have just really gone ahead with all that off the field stuff. And then when you put that onto the field, I think they're going to learn a lot from this European campaign. I think when they're going away, even that Thursday night away there, I think they're going to learn a lot when you go to other teams in a different country. I think they're going to pick up a lot of things, and just go back to the old days when you're not going to win or lose a league now, really. And I think just come February, March of next year, I think that machine will just kick in again. Right now, I think they're just trying to get by and stay in the pack. As long as they're thereabouts in February, obviously the European campaign will probably, I say probably, be ending around about that time. I think as long as they're in and around the pack, I think that's when the machine will kick going again. And I can see them winning this league comfortably, really, if I'm being honest. But I stand to have that clipped and thrown back at me in March and April. But I think Larne are.
I wouldn't be so cruel.
Maybe not you. Maybe somebody else will be doing it.
Well,
this is coming from a Carrick man, of course, telling Larne.
Here, I think Larne fans are already clipping up my daring doubts, and they're already getting them ready for 2 weeks when they go on a winning run and score 20 goals in 3 games. Let's talk about the Mid-Ulster Derby. I'm sitting here looking at 2 headlines to play out as the key narrative coming out of this game. Glenavon win 2-1 against Portadown, and I'm torn between, is this an awful week for Portadown, which completely derails the good feeling and the form that they were on? Or is this finally Glenavon getting that big victory after good performances that give the odd draw? They huff and they puff and they get the win. They overtake Portadown and they now look to march on as a team you need to take seriously.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, week one, we looked at Glenavon and thought, oh boy, they're in serious bother here. But they've played reasonably well since that week one defeat at Taylor's Avenue. And as you've already mentioned, they maybe haven't got the results that they maybe deserved. And they've been much more, much tighter at the back, and a goal here and there can win them a game. I think that these couple of games that we're probably going to talk about now, Coley and Crusaders, another one. Those four teams, it could go either way. That between Glenavon and Portadown, it could have gone either way. Ports played quite well in the first half and got ahead. That's just a last minute spill from the keeper. David McDade's on hand as he's been for years, sticks it away. Glenavon win 2-1. Everything's cock a hoop. But I mean, it could have gone the other way, and everybody would be downer. But I think Glenavon have certainly turned the corner now, getting above Portadown. Obviously, Middlesbrough Derby, it'll give them a little bit to walk into work on Monday and Tuesday, and give the other fans a bit of tap winning a derby. And I think Glenavon are doing okay at the minute. I wouldn't say they're playing free flowing stuff and definitely going to. But I think a lot of these teams, it is going to come down to moments. You can win a game, you can lose a game in moments, and I don't think there's much between that mid-table sort of smash of clubs that you've sort of mentioned there. For Portadown, I wouldn't look at it as bleakly as you pointed out there. Yes, they've gone out of the Cup, League Cup. Obviously, a good run on that last year, but they've gone out of the Cup and then lose this derby, which will hurt. It'll hurt. There's no doubt about it. But I don't think things are as bad as you sort of point out in terms of the week. I think they've got off to a really good start, got themselves into a position, and with, as you mentioned, Loughgall and Carrick not winning games at the start, they've got that little buffer. Next few weeks could tell a tale. They don't want to get into that losing habit that would drag them back in again. A couple more wins towards the end of the year, and they'll be up around the 18, 19 point sort of thing, and that wouldn't be bad for the first few weeks of a season. Carrick I think they'd be quite happy with the way they've performed so far. They haven't been looked out of their depth, and as you mentioned last time I was on last year, they beat all these Premiership teams in cup runs, and they definitely haven't looked out of their depth this year so far. So I wouldn't be as worried at Portadown right now as maybe you think.
We've talked to people of Glenavon persuasions on this podcast. They've been bullish, and they must feel finally we've got that win. Keith Ward was hugely influential, listening to it, following the game. He is a player that has a great deal of pedigree playing in the League of Ireland. Perhaps doesn't have the same gusto that he used to have, but on days like this, you can see his quality, his ability to move the ball around. Portadown, somewhat the complete opposite there without Gary Thompson, who was injured against Ballymena. They lose Owen McCall in the centre of midfield. Josh Ukek, who I was impressed with when I saw him against Ballymena. He got sent off against Ards, and that could be for a while. So they're without a couple of players that make them tick, and looked as though playing away from home without those players that they would usually have as their everybody has injuries, to be fair, but that looked to be the thing that as the game pushed on, Ports were able to sneak a goal. Glenavon then are able to fight back, get the goal, and it's usually Portadown who are the team getting that last minute goal. And now from potentially sneaking 6 if they were able to get those chances converted, which they attempted to make up in the build-up against Ballymena, and then they lose to Glenavon. It's 3 losses in a space of 8 days. I do think Ports fans were getting a bit excited. 3-0 against the Crews. They were like, hey, and you know what? At one point, they were sitting in the top 6 on Saturday. Yeah. So for them now to be sitting below Glenavon, to see Carrick Rangers win, their 10th, like... I definitely think you took a Portadown. If I had a Portadown fan in front of me and I say, would you take 10th? They would shake my hand for it. However, they had a fleeting flirt with, they were in business class for 5 minutes, and somebody poked them on the shoulder and said, Come on back now. Come on back. You've had your chance. So look, things could really change for Portadown against. They've got Lockall. That's the game they want. They want to win. Kind of have to win to get that result. And we'll talk about that in a bit. It would help them feel like we're putting. There's 7 points between them and Lockall. They win that. You expand that to 10, and they can perhaps don't feel panic, because I'm sure the way Portadown have been over the past number of years, it could all slip into the panic that they're usually used to at the bottom of the table. Congratulations, Glenavon. They haven't had a lot of goals, but they, a bit like Glentoran, they'll want to take that big win, big crowd, a victory they really fought for over bitter rivals who have had the bragging rights since that cup game earlier on in the year. To turn it round, all the McDonaldites will be punching the air in delight after that weekend. Let's talk Coleraine Crews. Big win for the Crews. I think Coleraine are just stuck in the mud. They're just struggling all over the place, sitting there in 8th. But Crews, 2 wins on the bounce. Harry Franklin looks to be influential. You bring on Jordan Stewart to get the goals. Perhaps this team is starting to find their feet again after a nice little run at the start of the season.
Yeah.
A few bruises along the way, but stronger forward.
I think so. I think it's going to be, I think your Crews fans at the start of the season would have said, right, we mentioned about change of managers, and there's a change in whole ethos. I think Crews fans this year are fairly acceptable to say, let's see how this goes. And even if they weren't to finish top 6, that wouldn't be the biggest disaster, but they want to see progression, and they want to say, I think the biggest thing about Crusaders is trying to get a couple of young lads in the team again, developing the young players and getting them in. How Franklin looks good, as you say, and trying to just get a few young players through Lewis Barr and all coming back in as well. I think that will be a big thing for them. If they can get a few sort of younger players in and refresh the team a wee bit, I don't think they'll be too worried about this season in terms of position. Obviously, they'll want to try and keep up the table and picking up wins against these teams. I mean, looking at that game on Saturday against Coleraine, again, another game that could have gone either way. I think Jamie Glacken hit one from about 6 yards out, open net, and that goes over the bar, and that could change the whole game then. As I say, just these little moments in these games I think are huge. I don't see sort of one team dominating another in that game particularly. Don't think one team dominated the other, but the Crews just took 2 chances. It was the goal that Stuart scored was a 50-50 challenge just outside the box. He won it when really the defender probably should have been a little bit stronger. Stuart goes on to score. They win the game 2-1, and they go home happy in the Coleraine. It's doom and gloom again at Coleraine. It could so easily be the other way, and Crusaders are looking over saying we've lost those points. But as I said earlier, they've got a big game now. Dungannon Shield comes into fruition on Tuesday. They've got the Blues coming, and then I think Linfield again next week. So, a couple of wins there for the Crews, and they're certainly looking up the table rather than that mid-table. And as I say, I think they'll take anything this year as long as there's a little bit of progression, and they're looking forward.
Yeah, totally. I don't know if there's really a huge amount of pressure on Dyke Cadell even this early on. Their frustrations for a Crews side and fan base who aren't used to that little run that they were on. Perhaps they need to get used to that now, and there will be moments like that throughout the season as they try to create this new era. We have to talk about Coleraine. Performances have been there, fleeting moments. At what point are they're a fan base who were promised a lot this year. They've got a number of names in through the door. The results just haven't been there at all. Look, a couple of wins could shoot you up the table. We all know that. Like, no one wants to play Carrick right now. That's what they have on Saturday. All of this pre-Halloween. They then go against their high-flying rivals Ballymena away. Then they go to Cliftonville on a Tuesday, and they wrap that up with a home game against Glentoran. Of course, there is 9, 10, 7 points that could be pocketed from those games, but they aren't going to come easy.
I think if you're talking about these two teams, and we've just talked about Crusaders, and maybe the lack of pressure or the less pressure on a new manager, new manager at Coleraine. I would be more worried about Coleraine than I would be about Crusaders right now. As you say, they've been promised quite a lot. They had a very experienced manager, Oran Kearney, who's moved upstairs and is running the football sort of side of things, bringing Deal Shields in. It's going to take a wee bit of time for me to adapt into the full-time sort of aspect of things. I'd be a little bit more worried about Coleraine. Got to go to Carrick, as you mentioned, next Saturday, a rearranged game. And then they got a tough wee run there. And you mentioned about picking up 8-9 points from these next 4 games. They get a tough game. If they don't get a result on Saturday against Carrick, you could be looking at 1 or 2 points, and then suddenly, I think the pressure will start to ramp up on Coleraine, especially with their nearby rivals sitting at the top of the league at the minute. That just ramps it up even more again. And if Ballymena were to win at Coleraine, that could just catapult Ballymena even further and put more pressure. We talked about Derby defeats, put a lot more pressure on Coleraine. So we're a bit more worried about Coleraine than I would be about Crusaders right now. I
appreciate this sounds daft, but 14 goals they've conceded. I was almost surprised it was that low. As in, I thought it would be more. It's the top end of goals conceded if you take out Carrick and Loughgall. I mean, Loughgall, they've conceded 30 from 11 games. The next highest is Carrick at 21, but again, awful run they've been on. The next one up is 14. So there's a big difference, and maybe that just shows you, Port, the same amount as Glenavon conceded 14, Ports have conceded 13, so have Ballymena, so Lauren's still looking good on that side of things, albeit they've only played 8 games. But that's the thing. If I think of Coleraine, I just see their team being ripped apart at the back, and they're all at 6s and 7s at times. So we are I mean, just about, we're on the absolute edge of me saying it's still early, but it is. There was a lot of changes for that Coleraine side. It can be a easily wind up bunch. Those Coleraine fans, they have high expectations. They're clearly not being met. And if Coleraine don't get a result against Carrick on Saturday, where I think there'll be pressure, it's going to be a high intensity couple of weeks for all those involved at Coleraine. We look ahead to this week, busy week, because we've got all the regional cups, which we'll not go into game by game, but I must say the regional cups have definitely found their footing recently, haven't they? I know the County Antrim Shield has always had its role as this third tier competition that usually only impacts the Belfast teams plus others, but we've got Ports against Glenavon in the Mid-Ulster Cup. Ports were very delighted to have won the Mid-Ulster Cup last year. The Northwest Cup's a thing that's ticking over, so it's finding its role, aren't they?
think the major thing is that they've started to play them on at the same time. There used to be a little bit sort of higgledy-piggledy, and you'd play the County Antrim Shield would be one week, and the Northwest would play occasionally the other week. But they've sort of streamlined it a little bit now, and when the County Antrim Shield is on, the Northwest is on, and the Mid-Ulster's on at the same time. So it all kind of, probably from fixture-wise, keeps everybody in the same sort of area, that Portadown's playing at the same time as Larne are playing, or in the County Antrim Shield, whatever. Everybody's playing at the same time. But yeah, look, I think it has become a thing. And as you mentioned there, I mean, Portadown's win last year in the Mid-Ulster Cup, they made that a big thing, and rightly so. It's a trophy at the end of the day. It may not be involving every team in the country, but it's still a trophy, and you can point to that. And getting used to playing in cup finals isn't a bad thing. So yeah, Northwest as well, Institute and all them teams, giving that a good run up there. And it gives Coleraine a bit of a chance to have a look at players and things like that. So definitely the little sort of local cups, if you want to call them that, definitely have a place to play. A lot of people are talking about ditching the County Antrim Shield and things like that. I know one team who don't want to ditch it, and that's Larne, because they'll be heading for another win in that County Antrim Shield. It's kicked a wee bit like the League Cup in England with the Premier League. You won the League Cup, that almost became your precursor to go on and do really well if you won the League Cup in your first couple of years. And Larne have obviously won those County Antrim Shields, and now they're obviously looking at bigger things now. But certainly that County Antrim Shield win for Larne kicked that. So yeah, look, I've mentioned a few times here that I think Tuesday night in the County Antrim Shield in particular will will give us a few pointers there. A lot of teams could look for that trophy and maybe Carrick bringing a new manager in. If they were to get to the semi final, they could be looking at semi final straight away. But there's a few good games in that in the Kenyan Shield and indeed in those other local tournaments as well.
Cruise Blues, Cliftonville Ballymena, Glentoran Carrick, Larne against Newington. I imagine the kids will be back out and running. Quickly on this, did you see Larne have got that little European version of their top back? They're all red for the game, so I think there's just a wee tweaks for the competition required. And look, they've got a little memento for their fans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's just what I talked about earlier on in terms of their infrastructure and things like that. They've got little tweaks like that. It looks like a little small thing, but it just shows that they're thinking about things other than what's happening on the pitch. Those fans getting away to travel to away games in Europe. I mean, have regular games away in Europe, not just a one-off. Let's go on a trip to Iceland or the Faroes or something like that. They're going to be able to plan ahead and go away. And just introducing a new kit is just something to say. I was on that journey with Larne and things like that. I just think smart business models in Larne. I think they're doing a really good job in terms of that. And obviously, story breaking recently about selling their ground rights as well. Little things. I'm not a big fan of that. Don't get me wrong, but that's the sort of level we're talking about Larne now. And we could be playing Inver Park, maybe a thing of the past, literally over the next few weeks.
Well, I look forward to completely ignoring the name of that sponsor on this podcast moving forward, as I do for everything.
I know you do that at Carrick Rangers as well. It's always Taylor's Avenue.
Always Taylor's Avenue. I found the Mid Ulster Cup games. I've struggled for the Northwest, so tough. Google's not my friend. Dollingstown, Dungannon, Loughgall, Anna, Rathlin, Newry. That's a nice one, and then Glenavon Port. So I think there's one thing I do know that I've just decided for the narrative of the league. Some major player for some major team is going to, I don't know, they're going to pull a hammy or something in one of those games, and everyone's going to be like, oh, why are we playing these big players in these big games? But yes, fun times all round. But let's return to league action, the meat and potatoes of this podcast, of course, and the games that are coming up across this weekend. I've got some unfortunate and frustrating news for you, Mr. McCalmont, and that is that those pesky international games are taking away fixtures as a couple of players are away for international games in under 21s and youth football mainly. But we don't have Carrick against Larne, we don't have Coleraine against Cliftonville, but we do have Carrick against Coleraine. Let's just put a wee discussion about this in the bud because we've half done it already. This is a draw for me, 1-1 down at Taylor's Avenue, and it's just I can't. The way Carrick produced on Saturday there says there's something about them again. Coleraine will be coming in slightly shaky ground. There'll be a new manager sitting there in the dugout. I wouldn't go as far as a win, but yeah, I'm going to go 1-1 there.
Yeah, as you mentioned there could be a new guy in the dugout. And that could be a big thing in terms of lifting the team. It obviously depends on who it may be, but that should be done, I would hope, this week. So that would be a good news story for the club just moving into that game next weekend. And obviously depending on what happens on Tuesday in the County Antrim Shield, there could be a bit more of a feel-good factor about the club again. Given what I've seen yesterday, I do hope that they stick to that plan over the next few weeks of being solid at the back. Curtis Forsyth was back to his very best on Saturday against Cliftonville. And if he plays well and they get more of a sort of central defensive partnership between Stuart and McCulloch, and then maybe Ben Tilney coming back in at left back, although he's been injured recently. So just that solidity coming back, they could frustrate Coleraine and again hit them on the break. If they can hit them with that little bit of pace again. I do see signs of it coming back, and I mentioned earlier on I wouldn't this may be another clip up here, but I wouldn't put it out of Carrick's reach to put on a bit of a run here, and I think this is a good fixture for them coming up. Coleraine just in a little bit of a difficult situation, and I think Carrick might nip over the line here by 2-1 maybe.
Elsewhere, Cruise Blues, always a fun fixture. Seaview makes this a different kind of game, but I can't see Cruise surprising the Blues here, despite all my can't do it across 90 minutes chat I had earlier.
Yeah, difficult fixture, and again, obviously the game on Tuesday, although it's not going to be probably the same two teams taking the field in terms of personnel, I think it might have a bit of an impact. And as I mentioned earlier, I think it ramps up the pressure a wee bit on Healy here in terms of what's been happening over the past few days. A bad defeat at home to Glentoran doesn't help going into these two games against Crusaders, which is always difficult away from home. But then away from home may help the Blues actually in this occasion. Just playing that little bit of freedom away from home, and I think Tuesday will have an impact. But Crusaders again is the drive there, and I think the Blues need to get back on the bicycle pretty quickly here, just to get the narrative changing here. Because as I said, they're just in a little bit of a down off the field here. They're not kicking on all cylinders. So big few games. I fancy the Crews might nick a draw here.
2-1 Blues for me there. Glenavon against Ballymena. Can the recent stout defence of Glenavon take care of business for the second weekend in a row at Mournview Park? I'm sure many people will keep getting in behind Ballymena until they stop. I think this is going to be a 1-1 draw. I did see them against Portadown, and I thought Ballymena were shaky going forward. They almost they just got out of dodge in the League Cup, but again they came up against Loughgall. So maybe they're back at it. I'm going to say 1-1 here in this game, which is probably a great result for Glenavon. And look, Ballymena every point on the board, can't complain too much,
No, definitely not. I'm gonna stay on the Sky Blue bandwagon here. I think they might go into Mournview and pick up another win here. I think it might just keep going. I mentioned when I was last with you that Tim Irvin had a really tough year last year, but that might really be good for him if he can get through the year and keep Ballymena up, which he did eventually through the playoff. I think his experience last year would really have helped him this year, and obviously he's got a few top quality players in. Don't think we need to go into that. I think everybody knows. But I think he's got it running. And I think they might just nip into Glenavon and come away possibly with a really hard-earned 1-0 win.
Underrated at the back are Ballymena this year. Everybody's touting about who, and they're him and the managers and manager Jim Irvin is getting their plaudits for that. But at the back, they are also performing. I think if Ballymena win here, this may sound daft because it's not. And look, they have beat Larne. It's not a Larne or a Linfield or any of that type of stuff. If they beat Glenavon on Saturday, I think they are the real deal, in that I feel very confident they're sticking around this top six. One more win, and next week on the pod we are talking about, are they title contenders? That, genuinely, right? So prepare for the overreaction. That's where I've got a lever right here, and I'm gonna pump it up if they get the win. I'm gonna say 1-1 there. We all loved it the first time this season, and it's gonna be run back this time in East Belfast. Rodney Macquarie Jamboree, everybody. Glentoran against Dungannon. Glens will be fearing them because Dungannon had the running of them earlier on in the season. They're coming off the back of a 3-0 victory against the champions. 2 men on John McGovern, is that the answer?
Yeah, well, look, I think this is the make or break game here of the weekend. You're talking about Ballymena. Maybe if they win, they could be going on the top 6 trial, but I think this is a big game in terms of these two teams' season. Dungannon are going to
Dungannon could go top. Dungannon could go top.
I mean, things like that could happen. They could come in here and burst the bubble, as we talked about. Glentoran have got to get on a momentum after that big win. It's no good, and I think the manager and players said it, no good beating Linfield away from home and then slipping up at home. But this is a proper team coming in here on Saturday, and if they can go away to Larne, win 3-0 this past weekend, and then go away to Glentoran and get a result. I've looked at their fixtures coming up, Dungannon. They'll see a few wins coming after the Glens, and if they can pick up a point or even better, a win, then I'd be maybe on the Dungannon bandwagon as well as Ballymena's. I think both of them could do well in terms of the top 6. And conversely, then that creates where do those two? If those two are going to stay in the top 6, there's got to be 2 teams that drop out of it. So they've got to be looking and thinking, we got to be really looking concerned about these 2 teams if they're going to keep going.
What I can say here to Dungannon is if they do get a result against Glens, it won't be a shock. That's where they are right now. kiss of death for me, but I always back the hot hand here, and they feel hot after Sunday's victory. 1-0 the Swifts. Glentoran returned,
Wow.
being being a bit meek in front of goal, and right now Dungannon have plenty of players who can create or score or are able to craft something up. So yeah, might feel like a bit of a snatch and run, but 1-0 Swifts. Ports Loughgall final game. It's actually 5:30 down at Shamrock Park. I mean, Loughgall are the worst team in the division. However, Loughgall were able to sneak a point against the Ports. I think the only teams that Loughgall have been able to get points from are, well, Ports and Carrick, as well as Glenavon are the ones there. So far, including Loughgall, those are the bottom four sides. So it kind of tells you a bit that Loughgall are somewhat of a litmus test. At home, Ports need to bounce back. I think they should, and they will. I'm going to say 2-0 victory for Portadown here.
Yeah, I think the stat you gave earlier on about goals conceded tells everything there. And Portadown have been pretty decent in front of goal. Been scoring reasonably regularly. And I think they'll probably win out here. I think 2-0 might not be a bad shade, actually. So I'll back you up on that one and go 2-0.
Obacan's going to be a big favourite in the fantasy teams this week if you happen to play the one that you can rotate in and out.
No, don't go there. Don't go there.
Before we go, Ali, tell us about the one that you look after. How's that been? Obviously, you've got your own scoring system, not completely alien to anybody that plays fantasy football, but is there actually, tell you this, last time I checked, I don't know if I've seen the most recent one, I saw last weekend, there's 2 people with the name Cinnamon in the table last week. I think I'm faltering in the other version of it, but I'm hanging around.
Well, good to have you back in the Sunday Night Fantasy Football. You're back in the top 40. I think you're still hanging in there this week.
Former manager of the month twice. Let's not forget that. But moving on.
That's true. You're in the top 40 at the minute. So
and that's without Ben Kennedy as well, I think.
That's true. Very few people actually picked Ben Kennedy initially. A lot of people have transferred him in, obviously, since he started taking penalties every week.
That's true. Ben Kennedy.
So that's been a big thing. But, as we talked about in terms of the league, Dungannon doing well, Ballymena doing well. In terms of Dungannon's clean sheet, Adam Glennie's been a massive pick if somebody picked him up early. But we did change it up a little bit this year in terms of scoring system. We've now awarded points for headers. We've actually 2 points if you score with a header, 2 points if you score with a direct free kick. We now take points off for yellow cards as well. So it just makes. Sometimes it was just getting the same players every year. So you maybe pick up a different type of player now. He maybe picks up, headed goals or things like that. So it's just added a new dimension to it. But yeah, I've been running that for quite a while now. I really love it. It keeps me well over all of the games, etc. And I really enjoy it.
I will express this on behalf of other managers. This year was a toughie. Are you the man that sets those prices?
No, absolutely not. I'm going to hold my hands up right now. I stay well clear of that. Because of this particular conversation, I'll always be held. I do not set the prices. And then people every year say the same to me, it's really tough and things like that. But in a way, yeah, I like it to be tough because it creates a wee bit of your knowledge of the cheaper players. Can you find that player who was Benji McGee last year, for example, was only a really low-priced player? Can you find that guy? Do you know a guy that's going to play week in, week out who's a little bit cheaper? Maybe get in. I like that kind of thing, but I appreciate it is difficult. We have the 1 player per club rule as well, which means you can only, which I like as well, because it means you're across every game in terms of your players. So yeah, I appreciate it's tough, but I like that.
I'm looking at mine right now. I definitely nailed Offord. Need Gibson to come back and going. Galvin hasn't been my man, and elsewhere Cooper was my kind of main backing. And Ives and actually McKinnon. That's why I like McKinnon's been a dead on one for me. Good price, whatever. But we'll move on and stop patting me on the back. Ali, we'll always come to an end here. This is maybe your 3rd time on the podcast.
This is my trio. Yeah, third time.
Do you know, without looking, what this is episode wise in the Odyssey of Kicking Match? It's not a round number, if that helps.
Okay, well, I'm pretty sure you've had 100 episodes, so I'm going to go 115.
Incorrect. It is number 99, which means This time next week, get the candles out. If I can spoil it, it might have a Carrick little twinge to it as well. So thank you very much. I think you've been on 3 times.
Yeah, I have.
Big number 100 coming round next week, which is very, very exciting. This is the 3rd series of me doing this. I know this is what I should be spinning, but genuinely continues to grow week by week. This is bigger than ever. It's crazy to see how episodes jump up above episodes' total listenership back in the day. It really does take it one step at a time. But look, I love it. I'm very thankful to people like you and all the guests. I'm sure the amount of guests I've had on this podcast is probably around 30, maybe more than that. And it's all, you give it your time. I know people appreciate it. I know people love the fact that it's a unique, different voice every once in a while coming around. So thank you, Ali. Stick around for next week, dear listener, because it should be a fun one, which means it'll be nil-nils across the board for us to talk about. But Ali, where can people find your work and your thoughts? I know at the start there I introduced you. You have a wee notion for cricket as well.
Yeah, I always bring that up. I've actually sort of gone full-time commentating on cricket there during the summer, so I was quite busy with a lot of Ireland games. Ireland's test match against Zimbabwe was a big thing in Belfast, and then a big shout out to the women's team who've beaten Sri Lanka and beaten England over the past sort of 6 to 8 weeks, which has been great. So it's been a good cricket summer despite the weather, which has been pretty difficult. So yeah, a lot of cricket work. Obviously moving into football now. I'm still working at Carrick Rangers as the announcer, so you'll hear me there. But anybody needs a bit of work, I'm always open for work during the winter here. Give me a call, and you can find me on X on Draw on the Trade, and Instagram on Draw on the Trade as well. So just to point out there, as you mentioned, this podcast has gone from strength to strength, and kudos to you for starting in the first place and letting it grow week on, week out, and giving an opportunity for the likes of myself and others to come on and spout a lot of nonsense every week.
Wee cutie. I'm just really glad to confirm that Cricket Summers and Brat Summers do not coalesce. They are very much against each other. Ali, until next time, and there 100% will be. Cheerio. Have a good one.
All the best, Peter. Cheers.
Now, I hope you've all been good boys and girl, because I said this time last week for all you lot, hey, that band of mine that I look after and manage, they have a new single. And you know what? In the grace of God and all those things, it happened. They released it. That was good. Spotify was my friend. It usually is my friend every week when I put out the pod, but sometimes you gotta release music. I don't know how uploading like an hour and a half of dithering by me is somehow harder than just some 3-minute track. It's a headache. I'll not bore you with that. But the song's out there, and for all the effort that I put in, I think you should be very nice and enjoy it. You can enjoy it on Spotify. You can enjoy it on Apple Music. You can enjoy it on Deezer, if that's still a thing. Oh, I've got a whole load of things that probably you can enjoy it on, and if you want to, listen to them at all. That would be great. We'll get 0.000p, I guess. So yeah, Wood Burning Savages is what they're called. The new song is called Grind Your Teeth. Fan of Biffy Clyro at the Drive-In, and other associated rock bands, Queens of the Stone Age. They're angry, they're loud, they're guitar-y, a bit like me, I guess. And if you're on all those apps, well, I guess you are because you're listening to this podcast, by the way, you should follow me on them or subscribe or whatever it's called, because they've got to differentiate themselves somehow by going to the main program page of this podcast, click the wee wheel or the button or the dots, whatever, click follow, subscribe, all those things, and boom, you'll be a part of a real cool club. You'll be a part of the subscriber follower club, and you'll get a wee notification say, boom, Peter's released a new podcast. And if you've noticed, I've dropped them a wee bit earlier in the day on Tuesday. Being a good boy, don't expect that to continue on happening, but it has happened for the past 2 weeks because I'm working hard, because I'm a podcaster. Guys, this has been emotional. Chat soon, because next week's 100, baby. See you then.